So, Juho Vepsäläinen from Finland, quite north. 3 years ago, I made a comment on someone's blog, and 3 years later, I'm in Israel giving a talk. So please comment on people's blogs. What happened is that I wrote a book. I split it up into 2 books. Here's one of those. It's the Webpack book, which you have maybe seen. You can find it online for free. You don't have to buy it. And I also have this, let's say it's backpack. So I have these posters and candy from Finland. People hate it or they love it, so it's up to you to decide. And when I came to Israel, they gave me hummus. I didn't like hummus at first, but then next day they gave me hummus again, and then I liked it. So I mean, that's my story with Webpack. I didn't like Webpack at first, and then I liked it. So, but anyway, to today's topic. I'm going to discuss Webpack and React, how these two relate. I'll give a couple of technical demonstrations and stuff, but we'll see. So, Webpack to React part. A little bit of background, why we use Webpack with React. Related solutions, what kind of solutions we tend to use these days. And then the more time, so we do these techniques, and something about universal applications. So that's kind of the bleeding edge at the moment. A brief history. So 2012, what happened is that we got that Tobias made a pull request, and it's open. So they didn't merge the work Tobias did. So there's this code splitting against modules web make, and Tobias didn't want to wait, so he wrote Webpack. So thanks for not merging this PR. And then we got React hot order. It had like 10 stars when I started using it. And then Webpack 1, February 2014. And then there was this guy from Instagram, Pete Hunt. He doesn't work there anymore, but he started promoting Webpack, and that was really big boost for the popularity of the tool. 2016 July, so around a year ago, we set up a core team. So it was me and a couple of other guys, Tobias and so on and so on. But yeah, we got more organized. So instead of having one developer, we got multiple. Open collective. So if you have too much money, you can support us. So please donate. But it's going quite well these days. So we have this sustained effort. Then we got Webpack 2 this year. It was quite nice kind of improvement because the problem was earlier, the thing was that it was really easy to write configuration that didn't make any sense. So we started validating the configuration and improved the user experience a little bit. We also did this site. So we did new documentation. And it should be a little better than the old one. I don't know if the old site is online actually. Let's see. Yeah, so I mean, this is what you saw. This is what I saw when I saw Webpack first time, and I didn't get it. So I mean, I saw this and I was like, yeah, let's skip this. But now it's more sensible. So you can actually see that it's bundling these things. So we give it files, and then we got something out, and then you give it some configuration files and stuff. So now it makes a little bit more sense. And then, yeah, the open collective, it started kind of working, so we have some kind of budget these days. And the book got out, and Webpack 3, Webpack 4 is coming. And now we have roughly 300,000 to use in yearly terms. About related solutions. So I think most of you know Create React App, right? So you get something that just works. You don't have to deal with the configuration. It hides everything from you. And you get this as a dependency. So they improve Create React App, and you update your dependency, and you get the new goodies. The problems begin when you need something else. So then you eject, and now you have this Webpack configuration, and you never learned Webpack properly. So now you're like, what I'm going to do with this? Because now I have this configuration, I don't understand what it does. So that's when people, they go to my book and they read the book, and now they understand, or they come to me and ask something. So that's another option, of course. But there's something known as React App Rewired. And the point is that maybe we could have like React App in such way that we could configure it a little bit or a little easier without ejecting. So that's why Tim Arney wrote this little solution. Then we have NWB by Johnny Buchanan. Less opinions, and it's not just about React, but it's something you can study later. And then we have Git. I like the name for some reason, but this is like the point is pretty much this. So they provide something for both for client, for like front end and back end. So they have this really opinionated solution that makes it a little easier to write entire applications, not just front end. And it's like closer to MVP than Create React App. And they have these starter kits. I like the name. And yeah, whole stack. And then there's this Andy in Germany. So what happened is that he read my book. So he went through the whole 500 pages of the book. And then he was like, this makes sense. So let's write code. So he pretty much took the approach I proposed in the book, and he packaged it up. I could have done the same, but I don't want to maintain these kind of things. So it's better that Andy does the maintenance work. So, but I mean, this is something you can study as well. So you get little abstraction over Webpack configuration. And behind Webpack blocks is actually a tool I wrote, Webpack merge. The basic idea is really simple. I just changed the behavior, the way we merge arrays. So instead of replacing arrays, we concatenate arrays. And as it happens, that's a very useful property to have for configuration. And it's just crazy to think that we get like 2 million downloads per month for a stupid package like this. I mean, I never imagined that people would really actually use this, but yeah, you know. And then we have Neutrino. Again, this is another abstraction of Webpack configuration. And they have React presets. So you could take these presets and just kind of push so instead of having that Create React app, that black box, you have something that's less of a black box. So, but yeah. There's an interview online, you can check it out later to learn more. But I think it's getting so boring that we should code something, so I'll go through some techniques. And I'll just go to the optimization bit, because also what we are going to actually do. So, let's see. So here's a little application. It's not a to-do app. It's something better. It's a Kanban app. So there's like this board. I mean, the details don't matter so much, but it's just that we have now an application we can develop. And let's bump it a bit. Yeah. So I'm going to show you what we have so far. Just building. So a lot of those text, but you see the guy that did this application wasn't so great developer. So now he has 1.5 megabytes in the app.js. So that's a lot. So the goal of these demonstrations is to do something about this. So maybe we can optimize this a little bit. And I'll show you how to do this step by step. But before we get into that, I'll show the current configuration. So I don't want to start from nothing. So I have something basic in place. So I point to the application. I resolve extensions, so I pick up both JS and JSX files. I emit the output to a certain path. I process the data, the files, through Babel loader. And for that reason, I have this little Babel configuration. So most likely you know this React preset, and then I have something else, ES 2015, and my own little preset that gives me certain features. This is really old configuration, React HMRE. Most likely these days you will use something else. And instead of this, you would use env preset. But this is good enough for the demonstration. Then I have the HTML Webpack plugin. That's very, very popular these days. I use specific template, HTML Webpack template with this because it gives me, I don't have to write the application DOM node myself. So it gives some like helpers to make these things easier. And then I have development configuration in which I choose the development tool to use. Then I do some development server specific configuration. I can customize host and port, and then I have the CSS specific bits, and HTML is enabled. And for production, I do a little different thing for CSS. So I have to use ReactNext Webpack plugin for now. So it's going to write separate CSS files for production usage. And in the end, I use my merge tool. So I pick up the common configuration and the configuration I want depending on the target. But this is what we are going to expand next. So back to the presentation. But before we can actually do anything, we have to figure out what's going on. So I'll show you how to analyze the build. So, I mean, this is the main thing. We have JSON flag in Webpack, which means that it's going to write the JSON file. I'll show the file in a little bit. We can also get the timing information about the build itself. And we can access the same data through Node API. And as it happens, once you have this file, I'll first generate the file. I'll do a separate target. So let's do this like that. So I tell Webpack that yeah, you should run in production mode, or I pass this env, use env flag to pass production to my configuration. So this env is going to be production, and it's going through this. So we get common configuration and production configuration, right? And then the timing information, and then the JSON or the whole bunch. And what happens is that I can run npm run stats. And now it's doing something. And here. So now I have this file, and I cannot tell much myself about this file. I mean, there's a lot of information. Yeah, there's something going on, but I just don't know what. So this is why we need these visualization tools. So like we have this graph, we get this graph really easily. I think I'll show the pie thing because everyone likes pie. So here is the pie thing. Here's my stats. So now I can see there's this really big bundle, and React DOM is taking like almost 40% of the whole. I have loaders for some reason. I could maybe eliminate that. React DND, React. That's what I expect. Then I have some development stuff that really doesn't belong to the production build. But now we can see the composition, and this is the starting point for actual work. And of course, if you want to impress people, then you show them star maps. So like you can get something like this, and this looks nice to the boss, so you can just do this. Examine that you see clusters, yeah, these are related, and it's just all, I mean, it's just, it looks good, but it's not that useful. But when it comes to usefulness, I would actually look into Webpack bundle analyzer. So you get this tree map, and you can zoom into the tree map. So you get the bundles, and you can jump into bundles, and this is highly useful. But I mean, this is enough. So now we see we have this app, and we can do something about it. So what next? This is classic trick that most likely everyone knows, but we can set up the define plugin to replace process env, node env. So the point is that we replace this bit here, and it becomes like a production or development or whatever we want, and it evaluates like true or false. Let's say it's false, so we get if false, and this means that that's dead code, and Minifying is going to drop the dead code eventually. You can do this without Webpack. If you use Babel, you can use Babel plugin Minifying replace to do the same thing. But to do this in our configuration, I'm just going to pick up this little bit. do I know this or here? Let's drop it here. Just going to. So now it's going to use this. It's going to write this production flag in place where we have process env, node env, and it's important to note that we have to escape this. So there are multiple ways to do this, but I went through the new template syntax. So what happens if I build this? So again, it's going to take a while. But yeah, now it's only 1 megabyte. So what happens is that the React itself, it uses the pattern. You can use the pattern yourself if you want. And based on this fact, it's able to drop certain code that's not so relevant to the production usage. But we can do a bit more. We can actually minify the code. So this means that we take the existing code and convert it into such form that still it does the same thing, but it's just smaller. So we do like a bunch of replacements. Sometimes you have to be careful. If you are really aggressive with minifying, you can actually break code. We have access to Uglify.js, Babel, Minify, Webpack plugin is another option, then we close a compiler. I'll go through Uglify.js in this case. You can also do the same for CSS. So you can take your CSS and you can crunch it a little bit, and you end up with less CSS, which is nice. And HTML. So if you have HTML templates, you can do the same. But let's set this up. So just going to set up Uglify.js Webpack plugin. It's actually included in Webpack itself at the moment, but we split it up from the core, so now we have separate plugin to use. So it can install, right? And I'll just import this to the configuration and do this really quick. So here's that, and here's that. Oop. So I can build again. So yeah, now it's taking more time because it has to do more work. But yeah, instead of having 1 megabyte, now we have 280 kilos. And we still have work to do. I mean, what this means that every time we make a change to the application, the client has to download the whole bundle. So we could do something a little smarter. So maybe that's the next step to do. We can do this by bundle splitting. This is quite common technique with Webpack. So what happens is that we take that big bundle and we split it up so that we have our application code and our vendor code in separate bundles. We could do more splits than that, but this is enough to get the idea. We also want to make sure there are these hashes in the file names so that the client knows to invalidate the files and get new files. And in Webpack, we have commons chunk plugin. This is exactly what we can use in this case. We also have more plugins. Let's say you're using HTTP2, you would look into egress splitting plugin and such. But it goes like this. We need some way to tell these application files apart from the vendor files. And as it happens, our vendor files, they exist in Node modules directory. So the next step is to figure out how to tell Webpack to do this. It's like this. The commons chunk plugin, it accepts min chunks parameter. And what happens is that when Webpack goes through modules, it's going to execute this check. And based on that check, it's going to either, it can move these files to the generated bundle. And to write what I just described as a code, I did it like this. So I check out the part of the resource that Webpack is checking. So if it's in Node modules, pick it up. And if it ends in JS, pick it up. This is extra check I added later because I realized that we are only interested in JavaScript files in this case. I actually got this idea from Rafael de Leon, one of my readers, And I'm really happy about this solution because now I don't have to worry about enumerating the package names or something weird. And we can actually implement this in our configuration, see what happens. So, like that. And let's pick up the check. Like that. Right. So if I build now, this will get something a little different. But this is easily, let's say, one of the most complicated plugins in Webpack you can find. It can do far more than this. But yeah, now you see we have our application code in one bundle, and then we have vendor code in another bundle. But the solution we have is not perfect. I'll show why. So we have build, and then we have this vendor. And yeah, let's format the code a little bit. It's minified, so it's complicated. But what happens is that Webpack is going to write runtime in this vendor file by convention. So we have the logic Webpack needs, and it has something known as manifest. And the problem is that the manifest is going to change whenever we make a change to the application. And that means that it's going to invalidate the vendor file as well. And that's something we don't want. So we have to deal with the manifest information somehow. I'll show how to do that next. So we get separate file, and we eliminate the problem. So it's one simple declaration to our configuration, and that's going to fix the thing. So now, so instead of having app and vendor, we get this manifest file. So yeah, there's this manifest. And to show that this is arbitrary, it doesn't have to be a manifest. I can do hummus. Let's try hummus. So I mean, it doesn't matter. You can. In Germany, I use currywurst. Germans like currywurst joke a lot. So if you go to Germany, use currywurst in your presentation. They like it a lot. So yeah, but now we have vendor app and hummus, and the hummus contains the runtime code. We can do more. I mean, we could start looking at the application, and maybe we see that there is some code that's really heavy that we don't need immediately. So maybe we can load the code later. Or one classic way is to split the whole thing to multiple pages, and then we load the code per page. In one client case, they were using this date picker. It was really heavy date picker, like 100K. And what we did tiny wrapper, and the wrapper loaded the date picker only as it was needed. So they saved some time in loading because they don't need 100K immediately. But the point is that we get these little split points in the code where we realize that we can load the code later. And Webpack is going to generate bundles for each. So in terms of code, you get something that resembles this. So we have import that returns a promise, and eventually it gives you module. And from module, then you have the module, you can do something with it. It might fail, so you can catch the error. You can also give names to these generated bundles. The point is that if you give the same name to multiple split points, they go to the same bundle. So you have more control as a user. So instead of having a lot of little tiny bundles, you get maybe something bigger, if it makes sense. And yeah, because it's promises, you can do promise all and whatever you know about promises. We have solutions like React Loadable, React Universal Component, and such that abstract this. But I'll actually show how to implement this idea in React. So there's to-do in the end. Yeah, here. So it doesn't take much to write a little wrapper like this. So you have async component that accepts loader that contains the import statement. Because in this component itself, it will perform the logic. It will execute the promise on mount. I was lazy here, or the example is a little lazy, so it will do maybe something on unmount as well, but this is enough just for the demonstration. And while it's loading, we can show a placeholder And otherwise, we use the component because it was loaded. And this is exactly what React Loadable does. So you get this tiny wrapper, you give it the promise, and you figure out what to do while it's loading. But I think I'll stop coding now, and I'll show the example instead of coding through it. So let's hit the changes. I actually have the whole example online, so you can find the code on GitHub and examine these examples later. But let's pick up the code splitting example. Yeah, I managed to typo it. Yeah. So here somewhere, I think it's containers. It's Redux application. So, but yeah, here I have like loadable lane, and here I have the React loadable thing, and here I load add lane component. I can show what it actually looks like. You won't see it very well because it loads so fast, but we can slow it down a bit. Localhost 8080. Oh yeah, I'm missing some plugins, so let's do npm install. The problem is that it's a little tricky to configure because this import is not standard syntax. So this means that you need a custom Babel plugin, and once you have the plugin and you do the configuration right, it's going to work. So again, another try. So it loaded really fast, but if you have really fast eyes, you can see it's loading. And the point is that you could do bits like this all over the application as you think is needed. But this would be nice if I had really slow connection. So I will see this loading screen, and eventually I would get the app. That would be something nice on mobile, for instance. But there's a bit more. So in 95, 96, when we started with JavaScript, it was all inline, so it was in the HTML code. Then we went to Ajax early 2000. Then we got single-page applications. Then we got server-side rendering. But as it happens these days, server-side rendering is not the problem. Code splitting is not the problem, but how do we do this together? That's the problem at the moment. Because you can do one or you can do another, but you cannot really do both quite well. So that's why I have something known as universal rendering. So if you combine these, we get this bigger idea. And this is quite bleeding edge. I'm still kind of trying to figure out why it works and why this is like new hot thing. But there's some logic to it, new packages and stuff. There's this React universal component and Webpack flash chunks. I mean, I had this Webpack moment with this because I'll show you why. I mean, the first thing you see is this. I was like, what's the point? But then I started to see the light. So, I mean, this is something that might change the way we think about these things when we do these bigger apps that have the server side as well. But on the component level, you do this wrapping. So the point is you have multiple pages, you use this universal wrapper, and as you move in the application, it just pushes the chunks you need. And it's quite nice to see in action. And it can deal with style changes as well. So as you move in the application and the style changes, it just updates the style and deals with the code splitting problem. For this to happen, they have to actually push Webpack forward a little bit. So that we have this result week these days. But it does more and more. And to learn more about the topic, you should check out the demonstration. It's just that little warning, it's still quite bleeding edge. Not a lot of people know about this or actually using it. So the APIs might change and stuff. But I think it's, I just want to thank James Gilmore for doing this universal bit. And that's it. So if you have questions, we can discuss in the break. And you can find the slides and the demonstration at GitHub. And no, I won't go into this topic, it's too complicated. So, thank you.